In a recent interview with the Russian agency TASS, the President Xi defined Putin as his dear friend. And in the same sense, Putin said, "We have unprecedented relationships. We are talking about two countries in the present and in the future when it comes to geopolitics. There have been differences since imperial times and then since the Cold War, but beyond their divergencies, these two actors have decided to leave their frictions aside and achieve a confluence of interest based on their growth objectives and contain the chaos policy that have been set forth by the United States. Russia and China are immersed in an endless systemic conflict, still unpredictable, but with everything at stake for humanity. Russia and China, the decisive combination for the new global order. That's what we're going to do today. As always, we see the games, and we're going to see analysis and some more information about this topic. The Chinese president is holding as of today, he has meetings with Vladimir Putin in the 23rd meeting of St. Petersburg. This meeting is the most important relevant economic forum. It is important the business forum hosts the country, and it expected the creation of joint funds for agreements in several areas. And there are going to be like 30 agreements are on the table to be able to increase this cooperation. Let's listen to what both presidents have to say. I have established close work relationship and a deep personal friendship with President Putin. In the last 6 years, we have met almost 30 times. Russia is the country I have visited the most, and President Putin is my best friend and colleague. I am pleased to say that the Russian-Chinese relationship have reached an unprecedented level. It is a global association and a strategic cooperation. When we speak of the current international and regional problems, we see that in most of them, the position of Russia and China coincide and are very close. More than a century of relationship together, they add up more than 1.5 billion inhabitants. More than Africa. Among the things they share is geography. More than 4,000 kilometers of common borders that are in this association. Russian border. Territorial space that geographically separates the binding territories between the People's Republic of China and Russia, intentionally recognized by now by both countries as partly defined since October 2004, and with the signing of treaties that was the second to last of a series of agreements in previous years. There have not been defined solutions since imperial times. An important agreement came in July 2001, by which parties agreed on good neighborhood, friendship, and cooperation. It is based on the opposition of the hegemonic and supremacist project of the United States and need to advance towards a multipolar world. In July 2008, another one was signed for the return of Russia to China in 170 square kilometers, which ended several decades of discussion. It is divided into a western and eastern side. The first measures 55 kilometers and located where the three countries converge. Then begins to the west the first triple point that joins China, Kazakhstan, and Russia frontiers, and continues to a second triple point that links Mongolia, Russia, and China. The eastern side is bigger. It has 4,000 kilometers of extension. It's the sixth longest international border in the world. The other borders divide the Russian territory from China and through an intricate geographical features, going through rivers, mountains, plateaus, From the Russian side, there are 5 federal areas located on the northern border: the Krai of Khabarovsk, the Krai of Primorai, Oblast of Amur, Oblast of Chita, and the Oblast of Autonomous Hebrew. On the Chinese side, the autonomous region of Mongolia, as well as the provinces of Jilin and Heilongjiang. It is the edge of this last where the border is the largest. The first commercial exchanges were in 1982, and since that time there have been highs and lows in this relationship. As to the population, there is a notorious difference. While the northeast Chinese plains are quickly populated by Chinese colonials since the beginning of the 19th century, the extreme Russian east was inhabited by European people for a longer time and less relevant to the Russian Empire. In the border provinces of Jilin, Heilong, there are 7 million Russians, and on the side of the river of Amur, and while there are 60 million of Chinese living on the other side. Through this shared frontier, Russia provides its neighbor tons of oil. This facilitates by 2 pipelines that provide oil from the Siberian city of Tomsk, where there are some resources, and the other one from the East Siberia. This area is crucial point of culture and cosmovision. Let's see what the Chinese agency Xinhua. China and Russia established a paradigm for relationships between the 2 great countries. Let's analyze this. The intensive interactions between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin have paved the road to a strong personal relationship between the 2 presidents, making their closeness and strategic association of coordination very clear. Between their countries, which are good neighbors, good partners, and good friends, mutual trust is a solid base of the development of bilateral bonds. Both nations maintain a non-alignment policy that is not directed against third parties, a fully different approach from the military alliance of the Western style, which has an innate need of enemies, be they real or imaginary. This is, as I told you, the news agency Xinhua. Let's see another news agency, Sputnik. Trump says to be committed to a commercial agreement with the United Kingdom after Brexit. The thing is that the meeting between Xi Jinping goes on at the same time at the visit of President Trump to the United Kingdom and France. In the United Kingdom, in the middle of protests for his presence, he had several high-level meetings in a conference with the Prime Minister Theresa May. He said that while the UK is preparing to leave the European Union, the United States is committed to a phenomenal commercial agreement. This has been several months in the wait. There have been several visits back and forth. In France, along with his French peer, Emmanuel Macron, they are commemorating D-Day, which was the disembarkment in June 6 of the Allies on Normandy coast to combat the troops of Nazi Germany in the Second World War. Let's see. Let's go home to our house. Telesur, February 24th, has an article saying Russia and China are closer every day, according to the main spies of the United States. This is from Alfredo Jalife. He's a Mexican analyst of Lebanese origin, specialized in international relationship, and teacher of UNAM. He quotes Hal Brands. And there are several topics in the books he is quoting from. And the third point says, U.S. spies, quoted by Brands, state that the international economy and global policy will be deeply configured by emerging technologies as artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and synthetic biology, and there is no guarantee that Washington will lead the rivalry of these competitors, Putin and Xi. He acknowledges that the international leadership in science and technology of the European Union has eroded, while Beijing has advanced in artificial intelligence and other technologies. It is evident that the decline of the U.S. technological domain will have tremendous geopolitical implications.
Bueno, allí se suma otro puntito.
Let's see something else.
A ver, y para seguir sumando a la parte informativa, vayamos a nuestra fuente de información primaria, previo al análisis, es decir,
our main source of information
capital rusa, porque allí nos espera el
from Moscow,
Hansel Oro, que ha estado
our reporting Hansel Oro.
Visita. Hola Hansel, más detalles contigo.
Hello, greetings for you and for all of our audience. A geopolitical game is the strategy between China and Russia, with the idea to further strengthening the diplomatic relationship between these two countries in the development of a strategic association. The Chinese President Xi Jinping is in Russia. In addition to the special visit, he will also participate in the International Economic Forum of St. Petersburg. Before this International Forum of St. Petersburg, both mandates met at the Kremlin and signed a total of 13 intergovernmental documents in the face of China's initiative of a route, as well as to face the sanctions from the United States against this Eurasian nation, but also the increase in U.S. tariffs to try to stop Chinese economy.
Millones de dólares esta cifra de intercambio comercial entre estos países. No obstante, para este año ya el presidente Vladimir Putin también dio a conocer de que el volumen de negocios
Vladimir Putin has also said
Recordemos de que
that their common interests are very high. This established 70th anniversary of the relationships. And China recognizes that Russia was the first one to acknowledge China as an international nation. And the processes of denuclearization, where China and Russia are a fundamental part of these agreements, to try to lower the tensions. These were among the topics that were on the agenda of the summit. And this Russia is totally committed to support China in their interventions in the initiative to do a route and face the U.S. tariffs to stop Chinese economy. When we return, we will define some information on the China-Russian relationship. We would like to know and have more numbers to see if it's a solid alliance. What topics are priority? What do both contribute to each other? Let's see the mutual benefits. We're going to a pause. Stay with us. We're back with critical moves. Our topic is Russia-China, decisive partnership. Two friends who shake their hands again. Two powers with historical path, explains the president. The intensity of this link is proven in the 30 meetings held between Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping in the last 6 years. This means a meeting that almost every 2 months, a permanent a team. Over 100 agreements, of which half have been effectively executed, and the other half is divided between those which are in process and long-term ones. Let's ask, is this... Let's see more information. Since the 21st century began, Russia and China have relaunched their diplomatic relationships. After the fall of the Berlin Wall in 2005, both nations began to carry out military operations and signed the joint declaration China-Russia for the 21st century. The text stated that Moscow and Beijing would reject all foreign intermission. The first country President Xi Jinping visited after taking was Russia. In addition, the two powers participate in several regional organizations, such as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. There, together with other nations, important agreements are channeled in energy matters, particularly petroleum and gas. These two nations advance in the military aspect, as well as gaining space in common security and strengthening themselves in the light of NATO military power led by the U.S. Commercially, in the last decade, the relationship considerably expanded. Today, China is the main business partner of Russia. In 2018, they bought 11% of Russian products: petroleum, wood, chemicals, and military weapons. Those acquisitions reported benefits of $56 billion. Similarly, Russia brought $52 billion. By 2020, both countries are expecting to raise their commercial exchanges up to $200 billion. They highlight projects in discussion for the supply of Russian gas for 30 years to China, and on the other hand, for the development of Arctic region, Eastern Siberia, and the far east of Russia. The balance associated in 2018 to $108. Okay, let me show you some other guests. We have David Gomez from Moscow. He's an independent writer. Let's start with David. People that get to know each other every time better and working on strategic projects. As we see them in the images, is this continuity in the relationship, or will it rise to a higher level? Well, thank you very much. What we're seeing is that there's a transformation relationship through this strategic relationship. We're just assisting to a vital relationship. In this crisis of imperialism, what we see is that there's a transformation of the world order, a reordering of the world order. There are two superpowers that are part of the Security Council in the United Nations and make important decisions for humanity. And they're leaders in the topic of disarmament, and they have a permanent defense in the struggle against hegemony, which has established the U.S. Since the falling of the Berlin Wall. They are strengthening each other, and they have a solid base based on friendship and common history. Not only between the governments, but the people, the Russian people and the Chinese people. This is why we as analysts can see the situation and point to strategies that allow us to have a new dynamic. And not only analyze this from the market standpoint that have been opened with the Silk Route, and that now Russia is part of, but also that we're able to understand the new relationships in the world, also with Latin America. Russia and China are each time getting closer to the Latin American countries. This has a cultural impact, social political impact. This is in front of the U.S. that's every day, day to day, is losing their strength, and the only answer is starting a war. This is why China and Russia need to conform. Let's see, I think we lost our communication. Meanwhile, I would like to talk to Alex. President Xi in 2018 said that China and Russia had a singular relation. I would like you to describe it from your perspective. What is the most relative topics of this? Well, the importance is very clear. The Washington Consensus that has been stated for several decades is now being substituted by the Beijing Consensus. So China is still a developing country, and what it's proposing to all of their member countries from south to south, when we know historically that all of the European countries in all of their phases, because all of the relationship with the country of South have been just of subjection, particularly if we speak about infrastructure, roads and railroads. The main objective has always been how to take out raw material, sacking raw material in very poor conditions for our countries. While China is not proposing the same thing. It is proposing, along with the Asian Bank, they propose to invest with loan conditions that are favorable. This strengthens the regional cooperation, and it counterparts the hegemony of the United States. So, the importance of China is huge. We can see it in Africa. And, well, as I was saying, United States, the multinational, Western multinationals have always been present. But the emergency of China and the agreement with Russia, this important cooperation, makes a counterforce that will allow the southern countries to find new ways of development. Let's go back to David. David, how is this bilateral alliance? Is it very relevant in times of commercial war? As we've seen, Huawei, the biggest carrier and a mobile operator in Russia, have signed an agreement to develop 5G in the country. As we know, whoever has the control over 5G have control of the world. Can you help us with this point? Of course. The United States is trying to stop the advance of China in technological and commercial fields. However, this might cost them even their hegemony. This is a desperate move, as it's customary for them. They open a war front, and then then everything is retarded for some time. This is a focus where the unilateralism is the most important thing, and the preponderancy of the United States, and a vision where the world is directing itself to a multipolar world and to a new world order that allows the respect of all people and upholds the respect to citizens. It's very important that we analyze this. In technology, if China can take over 5G, the world order, everything will change. The internet will be far faster. If it goes through, it will be a phenomenon that could modify the relationships from this point of view of commercial, military, and at this moment is in dispute in the world. That's why it's not only being debated an economic debate or technological, but it's the construction of a new world order. It's the future, the destiny of humanity in at this crosspoint that could define not only the next 50 years, but we will see important consequences in the next 100 years of the decisions that are not now being taken by world leaders. So that's why we feel it's very far away from the analysis, situations that happen like the ones that happened in Venezuela or Mexico with sanctions. But it turns out that they have a complete order. Thank you, Alex. Can you tell us if they are playing a smart game of military diplomacy and dissuasion? It is a relationship that can serve as an inspiration for other countries at the time of increasing interdependence, of a breach of the inherent order and chaos.
Excesiva interdependencia o de creciente interdependencia, otros dicen de caos sistémico, otros de crisis sistémica, otros dicen de desafío o de quiebre del orden internacional imperante, es decir, distintas definiciones.
Do you think that different definitions, but what do you think? Well, I think that the cooperation in the military aspect is a complementary action. We have to keep in mind that this emergency of this multipolar world is in a historical aspect, context. If we remember, Second World War had the U.S. as a winner that imposed itself over the old colonial forces. So the United States was able to take advantage and gave a signal to the world, especially to the Soviet Union, with the bombardment of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And it is an intimidation. Well, then began the Cold War. The Cold War. It's called cold, but it's really heated up because there were, in many places of the world, there were very bloody incidents. So after the falling of Russia, the United States recovers this power, this military power, a hegemony with 1,000 bases in the world, with a new role of the NATO that did not have any aggressive function when it was first created. But what we see now is an aggression in all of the international scenario. It's schizophrenia of the United States. First it was the Balkans, Afghanistan, Middle East, and Libya, and therefore no country is safe. And the military cooperation between Russia and China is very important. Since 2018, this is evidence that there are countries that have understood this challenge and will not allow to be stepped over. China needs resources. And although we saw that in the case of the war of Libya, it was not possible to stop the intervention, in the case of Syria, there have been many changes since China and Russia have stopped the pretension to defeat the Chinese government. And so it's the same war, it's one war. Because let's not forget that China and Russia are allied now. The next threats are Iran, and they have to check how it was all perceived. As we can see, it's beyond the law, and that it's violating international law.
Alex, David, muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much, Alex and David, for all of your support.
Hasta pronto. Allí les teníamos en pantalla. Desde Bélgica y desde Rusia, respectivamente. Bueno, analicemos.
Let's analyze this strategy used by China and Russia to contain the United States, which considers the rest of the world as their backdoor to the backdoor patio, at their disposition to its ambitions and interests. Let's see other aspects. Let's have our last pause, and we will have our guests when we come back. Please wait for us. China-Russia strategy to contain the U.S. In this part, we're going to try to decipher the strategy that they're using. And our next guest thinks that the solid relationship contains the U.S. hegemony. China and Russia, a strategy to contain the United States. They are powerful geopolitical partnership that challenges in the Middle East, Asia, Africa, Europe, and Latin America. For the U.S., the main enemies in the Middle East are Iran and Syria. They want to align Europe to its interest. In Latin America, the focus is on Venezuela. And in Asia, it's about obstructing everything that smells like Chinese and Russia. So it is a challenge that is more or less intense in each region, and which transversally crossed by commercial, economic, military, and political strategic aspects. In that sense, last summer between the presidents Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, it is a challenge for both nations which are subject to commercial sanctions imposed by the White House. Beijing and Washington sustain a hard commercial war since January 2018, when the United States imposed a 30% tariff on various products imported from China. That while Trump is in France and the United Kingdom and threatens with even more sanctions to China for $300 billion. In the diplomatic aspect and foreign policy, both powers keep agreements. In the Security Council, they both have voted in the same way regarding the nuclear weapons of North Korea, the Syrian conflict, the crisis in Venezuela, and the nuclear agreement with Iran, all contrary to the United States. Another great dispute regards currency. So, one of the signed treaties is based on the continuing expansion of the ruble and the yuan in bilateral trading. They also signed a mutual financial support agreement in case of instability in the global markets. This allows them to have absolute autonomy from the influence of the dollar. The Chinese-Russian partnership has also demonstrated influence in Latin America. Their stance in favor of peace and sovereignty in favor of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela has been pivotal. The closeness to Latin America has been considered alarming by the United States. This was publicly reported by Rex Tillerson while he was in Secretary of the United States. Now let's talk to the counselor of the Russian Embassy in Venezuela, Alexei Sirodin. Thank you for the invitation. We would like to know, what does the array of agreements that have been signed tell us between China? Well, first I would like to thank the participation in your program. And as I see, you did an excellent review of the relationship between China and Russia. And it's important to say that the China-Russian relationships are self-sufficient. It has been confirmed during this visit that both presidents signed an agreement in strategic cooperation. In this declaration, it was also included all of the it was confirmed the importance of the coordination of the passages through both countries and the policies towards the world. It's very important for us that China shares our vision. As we say, our focuses are mainly the same. And I would like to highlight that China coincides with us when it comes to the situation, the stability of worldwide. When the United States abandoned the anti-defense missile agreement in 2001, this created a void that allowed the United States to develop the new defense anti-missile weapons. So it's important to bear in mind that this was a key agreement during 30 years, and after which the United States began to start steps that destroys all of the system. Not so long ago, they advanced in the missile treaty, and this does not help the stability. We don't know what is in pair for us with the other treaties that they're going to sign. In all of those aspects, we share with China our transformation. All of these treaties are important for us to guarantee the stability. And China also shares with us the focus that it is necessary to fulfill the Treaty of Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. And the other agreement that's to stop nuclear testing, which the United States has not ratified. In Venezuela, we consider that everything should be solved according to the Constitution, international law, without any external interference in all of the internal affairs of Venezuela. And we have to veto by every way not to let Venezuela. Can we understand this as a coordinated front that will resist the hegemony
porque usted nombraba Venezuela y nos parece que en
because you said that
es un ejemplo paradigmático de la
Venezuela is an
política del
example,
presidente Donald Trump y lo mismo que ha sido aplicado en años anteriores en Medio Oriente.
as it's been done in the Middle East.
Sí, compartimos con China la
Yeah,
visión de
we-
que América Latina tiene que ser
We share with China
estable, próspera,
the idea that
que tenga
that
su voz
Venezuela
en
should be
la
independent and
palestra
prosperous
internacional. Es
and
muy
have its
importante,
own voice.
para la formación de
This is
un mundo-
important
de un mundo más justo,
for a
más
more
democrático,
fair and democratic
y,
world.
pues, si se quiere, un mundo policéntrico.
And if you want, maybe a
Y esto,
polycentric world.
lo defendemos en diferentes foros
This, we
internacionales.
uphold this in several fronts
Por ejemplo,
and several
en enero y
meetings.
febrero en el Consejo de Seguridad,
Like in February in the Security Council,
nosotros
we-
hicimos frente común en contra de la
we were
presión de
together
Canadá al gobierno legítimo de Venezuela.
against the legitimate government of Venezuela.
En el contexto de esta visita,
In the
se ha dado
context
el
of
Foro
this
Económico
visit,
Empresarial en San Petersburgo, un espacio
there
de
was
muchísima
this
relevancia. Se habla de
World
nuevos fondos
Business Economic
conjuntos,
Forum.
uno en yuanes, otro especialmente para la tecnología, como ya informaba.
And there's another one
Pregunto si
to
esto
global,
abonaría a la creación de
to
esa
create
nueva
global
arquitectura
technologies.
comercial internacional, alternativa
Do you
a
think
la
this-
hegemonía del dólar que tanto ha servido como
it's
moneda
possible to
reserva
have an
que tanto le
alternative to
sirvió
the
a Estados
dollar?
Unidos para preservar ese proyecto hegemónico, para darle continuidad?
Bien, fíjese, es que ya fue mencionado.
It was already mentioned
Bueno, como ya he dicho, que los Estados Unidos
that the United
tratan de,
States
socavar el sistema existente,
tries to hinder the existing
también las
institutions.
relaciones económicas. Ellos tratan de,
They try
de socavar, de
to affect
hacer daño abandonando
To-
algunos acuerdos internacionales y
by
esto
leaving
es
some
la ley
agreements.
internacional. A lo que se refiere a las relaciones bilaterales,
When it comes to bilateral
claro que nosotros
relationships,
tratamos de
China, Russia, of course,
desarrollar a lo máximo
we're trying to
nuestras,
develop
nuestros contactos,
to the
nuestros lazos,
furthest
en la
ours
esfera, económica.
our relationships to be able to strengthen our
El año
economy.
pasado fue,
Our exchange
108 mil millones de dólares.
was $108 billion.
Dólares le digo, pero porque
And we
nosotros
say dollars.
trabajamos mucho en, para,
However, we're
realizar
trying
el comercio en rublos,
to try to
yuanes,
carry out our commerce in rubles or wons. This will
a defender
this will
del efecto nocivo de la política de ciertos países
defend us from
que
the
tratan de
from the policies of other
asegurar su
countries
hegemonía
that
en
try to
el mundo,
ensure their hegemony
en lo que se refiere al comercio internacional.
in the
Marcan
commercial
sanciones
aspect.
a diestra y siniestra, y sincronizan también en un punto
They also
muy relevante en
synchronize
este momento, que es la franja de la ruta de la seda,
which
¿no?
is
Este
this-
cinturón
the-
económico tan ambicioso
this
que China
belt,
se ha
this
propuesto
route of
crear y
the
que con
Silk
cual quiere
Route.
unir a tantos países, ¿no? Crear un conglomerado económico, financiero,
They're trying to
productivo,
build a
comercial. ¿Qué
conglomerate.
tan importante es esa participación?
How important is
Sí,
the
es un proyecto
participation?
muy importante que
It's a
realizar.
very important axis.
Nosotros desearíamos
We would like-
participar también en
we would like to
este-
participate
en este proyecto
in this
y
project.
sobre eso hablamos con los chinos.
And we have
Ahora
spoken to
estamos,
China
estudiando
about this, and we're
las,
studying
posibilidades de integración
the
de
possibility
los
of integration
proyectos, que promueve China y
in
Rusia.
some
China,
bilateral projects.
baja un cinturón, una vía, y Rusia
And
desarrollo
both
junto
countries
con
are doing it on their own, and we're trying to integrate
el
them.
proyecto de la Unión Euroasiática. Estos dos,
There's a project of the
proyectos muy
Euro-Asian
importantes,
unity,
en el continente euroasiático, y creo que tiene un buen
and we
futuro.
think that it has a great
Nosotros,
future.
ya trabajamos en
We have
transcurso
already
de
started to
últimos
work
años, decenios de años,
since some years ago
transformación, desde el punto de vista de infraestructura.
in infrastructure.
Construimos
We've
gasoductos,
built
carreteras,
roads,
puentes. Hace poco
bridges,
inauguramos
and just shortly
todavía no se ha inaugurado oficialmente, pero ya se conectó el puente
we
sobre
have
el río,
been able to connect
que fronteriza
the-
entre China
the
y Rusia,
bridge
un río muy grande.
over the Russian and Chinese countries.
Cooperamos en el comercio,
We cooperate in the commerce.
suministramos a
We
China grandes
provide
cantidades de-
China
de
great
petróleo,
amounts of
también
petroleum,
tenemos proyectos,
and
de
we've
alta
got
tecnología.
projects of high
Queremos,
technology.
construir, diseñar y construir
We want to
un-
design and
un
produce
avión,
an airplane.
grande. También trabajamos para
We also
reconstruir un
design and
proyecto de
produce helicopters. There are many projects that we're participating in.
En la economía rusa, el total de las inversiones ahora
The total
se estima a $22,000 millones.
investment of China and Russia is $22 billion.
Nos interesaría, en este sentido,
And we would be
las
interested
inversiones de China en nuestro-
the
nuestra
investments
región
of
de
China
Oriente. Allá
in our regions.
los amigos chinos ya invirtieron
Back there, China already has started to invest $3 billion in different projects.
Una cooperación muy estrecha y muy buenos planes y perspectivas.
Gracias por esos números.
Thank you very much for all of those
Lo que
numbers.
estamos describiendo. Ahora le pregunto, nombraba el río Amur.
You were,
Una frontera compartida.
how's this border, this shared border?
En este momento.
Sí,
¿De amistad?
es la frontera de amistad. Y
It's a
en
friendship border. And in 2001,
mencionado ustedes,
as you
firmamos un
mentioned,
acuerdo de buena vecindad, de amistad y cooperación.
we have a
Y
good
este es un
good
acuerdo
neighborhood
marco dentro del
agreement
cual nosotros desarrollamos nuestra cooperación.
by which
Ahora
we
es la frontera de
now
paz, de cooperación,
now it's a
y
peace
esperamos que así
border,
sea
and we
en el
expect
futuro.
it to be
Hoy
like
hemos
this
hablado de
forever.
analizar una región a ganar a favor de esa
Europa-
cooperación estratégica.
What can be won?
Occidental, ¿quiere decir?
Europa Occidental.
Sí,
What can
claro
Europe
que
win from
nosotros
this?
consideramos que Europa es
We
parte
think that
del gran
Europe
continente euroasiático.
is part of the Eurasian continent,
Y es mejor que tengamos las relaciones muy buenas.
and it's better that we have good relationships.
También promovemos con
And we
Europa
promote
un
with
proyecto
Europe
que se llama de Lisboa, el espacio de cooperación
a
de Lisboa
project that is called
Vladivostok es,
from
una
Vladivostok to
ciudad,
Lisbon.
que está casi en la frontera
This
con
is a
China.
city that is
Y
on the
eso,
border with China.
las relaciones con Europa, pues,
And the relationship with
consideramos que
Europe,
son muy importantes,
we
y
consider them to be
el
very
proyecto
important.
de China, una faja, una vía también,
And this
llamado
project with the Belt and
integrar
Road,
todo nuestro continente, del cual formamos parte.
we are also trying to integrate them.
En momentos de guerra comercial,
At moments of
impuesta por el presidente de Estados
commercial
Unidos, Donald Trump,
war
Rusia,
with
China
Trump,
son países
Russia,
que en
China
estos momentos han sido víctimas de sanciones, de medidas
have been both
coercitivas,
victims
de
of
diferentes oportunidades.
sanctions.
El presidente Putin ha dicho, esas sanciones han
And these
sido,
sanctions have been
una suerte de boomerang porque
like a boomerang,
realmente se han devuelto al enemigo y hemos logrado
because
superarlas.
they have been
Esta
hit back to
alianza hace
the
también que esa
enemy.
posibilidad de salir airosos
Do you
ante
think
esa
there's a
política restrictiva de Estados Unidos
policy that is there a way that we can come out standing up from the U.S. policies?
Sabe que no llamaría estos
Well, I wouldn't call it
estas acciones que emprenden los Estados Unidos
as these
sanciones,
actions
porque sanciones como tal son
as
un
sanctions,
instrumento de
because a
derecho
sanction
internacional y solamente del
can be
Consejo
of
de Seguridad de las
can be
Naciones
only emitted by the
imponer
Security Council of the United Nations.
sanciones. Se trata de
These
unas
are-
medidas coercitivas unilaterales
These are
ilegales, que es lo más
unilateral
importante.
coercive
Eso, se refiere
measures.
a las acciones que emprenden los
This means that these actions that are
respecto a
imposed by the U.S. on
respecto
Russia,
a China,
and in respect to
tratan de
China,
socavar los acuerdos
they're
bilaterales
trying
y
to
socavar las normas internacionales
put
de la
to put in
Organización Mundial del
and
Comercio.
threaten the international laws.
Claro que nosotros tratamos
We are always trying
de evitar
to
el
avoid
efecto negativo
the negative effect
que puede producir
that may
estas medidas
provoke
en lo
these
que-
measures
respecto a la economía de nuestros países y como
in the
mencioné,
economy of our
nosotros,
countries.
ya estamos pensando en desarrollar
We're even thinking of
más el sistema de pagos en rubles y yuanes.
how to develop
También
this,
estamos
the
creando
payment
un
in
sistema de
rubles and in
pagos,
yuans.
bilaterales, electrónicos, independiente
We're
del
also trying to
sistema
develop
que está
electronic
por-
payments.
por los Estados Unidos en particular.
históricamente. Sí, ministro consejero Alexei Seredín, muchísimas
Thank you very
gracias
much
por
for
esta
your-
nota. Ha sido un
A usted,
placer.
muchísimas gracias.
for your collaboration.
Y nosotros nos quedamos con las conclusiones a continuación. Bueno, hemos puesto en esta jugada crítica
Well, we
sobre
have
la
placed
mesa
on this
algunos
table some
tópicos
topics
de una alianza
of bilateral strategic alliance that serves as a compass because they are self-sufficient and comprehensive, which goes beyond that dimension, at times in which the world experiments transformations since the last century, in which global economic recovery is in danger. The multilateral commercial system receives permanent attacks, and with an apparent international order that has not been efficient, and it is increasing risk to humanity. The Washington Consensus is being replaced by the Beijing Consensus. South-South relations, building a multipolar and polycentric world to democratize international relationship. To each region be prosperous while the United States undermines all regulations and disrespects sovereignty. That is a systemic conflict. We would like to go by until the next program. Thank you for being with us.